Welcome back to the Bonsai Builders podcast. I'm your host, Addison Galambos. Being based on the West Coast, I get to see a lot of massive California junipers, sprawling yamadori, and a very specific regional aesthetic. But the bonsai world in the United States is huge, and today we're heading to the other side of the country. My guest is someone who's been recommended by a lot of my listeners, so I'm really excited for this conversation, and that is John Romano. John's a highly respected bonsai professional based out of New England. He's also a rare breed in the US. He's certified by the Nippon Shohin Bonsai Association as a teacher. So today we're going to talk about the kind of unique flavor of the East Coast bonsai scene, the history of Shohin in the US, and what the US National Bonsai Exhibition means for the community on that side of the country. So John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Addison. I really appreciate you inviting me on. I look forward to your questions and some talking back and forth.
Awesome. So I would love for you to start, maybe just tell us a little bit more about yourself. And we were just talking about you recently retired, so congratulations. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about yourself from both a bonsai's perspective and just a general perspective.
Sure. So when I talk about my bonsai history, I actually go back to my grandfather who came from Italy, and my father also who came from Italy. But my grandfather, who we lived with for a few years, had an amazing garden, fruit trees, fig tree in Rhode Island, and taught us at a very young age about gardening. And so I think that kind of planted a seed in me to love plants and trees. And then jump ahead to 1974, and I went to the Boston Flower Show, which was a real big deal. And I think it still is, but I think it was bigger back then. And they had trees on display from the Arnold Arboretum, which is the oldest collection of bonsai from Japan in the United States. It came here in 1913. We could talk about that later if you want. But I was blown away by that. And so, I was still in college, and the journey began with books and such. And I was working and had young children and stuff. So it wasn't until about the late 80s that I really, delved into bonsai more fully. So that's kind of the beginnings of things. And then as we talk more, I can go a little more into that later on. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. That's so funny that you can, you kind of trace your bonsai interests back to, your grandpa and him instilling a love of gardening in you. I feel like I had a very similar experience with my grandparents as well.
Cool. You grew up in Pittsburgh, I heard?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
That's a cold area. My sister lives there. I've been there. I love Pittsburgh, actually. My sister lives there, and I've been there a few times.
Yeah, it's really pretty, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Whenever you first mentioned the Italian connection to bonsai, I was very curious because I was like, how did his grandpa get into bonsai? But it sounds like it was like generic gardening and then just that love of plants. Yeah.
Yeah. And trees. I mean, he had peach trees, pear trees, apple trees. And like I said, the fig tree, which is not hardy out here, but he would bury it every winter and then dig it up in the spring. So, they were cultural. I mean, southern Italy, a lot of the poor European immigrants were very close to the land and lived by their own gardening, growing their food. And so that's a big part of their life.
Interesting. We have a little bit of a connection there too. Actually, my family is on my mom's side is from Foggia in southern Italy, I think. So
cool.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Simpatico. Okay.
Yeah. My current last name is Hungarian, but my mom's maiden name is Italian. So
nice.
Cool. So you said two other things that were very interesting to me. I would love to understand a little bit more about what are the important gardens on the East Coast? Because in the West Coast, I'm very familiar with, we have this collection of kind of, the greater California bonsai, where we have a collection in Fresno, down in LA, and in Oakland in the Bay Area. And then there's obviously some museums up in the Seattle and Portland area. But I'm curious, what do you think are the most compelling or most important collections on the East Coast?
Sure. Good question. So just remember, I'm in the New England area, so most of my emphasis is in the Northeast United States. When you think of the length of Japan, the country. It go comparable to the eastern seaboard. It's like from Maine down to South Carolina, and that's an immense area. So again, most of my experience is in the Northeast, but that goes down to Washington. So obviously, the National Bonsai Collection in Washington D.C. is the biggest collection on the East Coast and quite spectacular. The other is the Arnold Arboretum, which is a smaller collection. As I said, it's the oldest collection of trees in the United States from Japan. The ambassador to Japan in 1913 purchased these trees from the Yokohama nursery, a famous nursery in Japan, in Tokyo. And they were brought back on ships in 1913, and they were his personal collection. He had a beautiful yard and home in the Boston area. When he passed away, his wife took care of them for a while and then donated them to Harvard, which owns the Arnold Arboretum. And that's where they are on permanent display during the warmer months of the year, anyways. So that would be the
That's very
second.
cool.
Yeah, it really is historical. There's some 400-year-old trees there. An interesting fact is in the early 20th century in Japan, the Hinoki cypress was kind of a cherished species for bonsai. It's not so much now. You don't see them as much. And that's probably the largest species collection in that Arnold Arboretum
Oh,
collection.
wow.
Yeah, so there's some big, and they were called, I think, Chabahibe was a variety, and there are some like 300-year-old trees in that collection there. Very big trees. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, very
So
cool. So,
outs,
so this was his personal collection for a
this
while.
was
It
his
wasn't like a
personal.
museum, and then it got obviously
Yes,
donated.
once he
And
passed away, his wife took care of him for a while, or gardeners did, and then they went to Harvard and the Arnold Arboretum.
hmm.
So that would be the second, I think, important collection. And then the Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania is becoming a big center for bonsai.
Huh.
I believe they just received a large donation of trees, and they're also having a big bonsai celebration this month, I think. And so I think that's going to be another center for bonsai. And of course, North Carolina has a collection down there. I'm not too familiar with it, but there are, and Florida as well. But like I said, I'm more up here in New England area, so I'm more familiar with what's here.
Yeah, maybe I'll say the Northeast from now on, because
Yeah,
definitely
why
want
don't
to
we?
talk about your. I think that the
Yeah,
South and the Northeast definitely have very
yeah, you
distinct
could get someone
regional
from like
identities. Yeah, yeah,
Tyler Sherrod maybe would be a good person to talk about the
yeah.
southeast U.S.
I talked with Randy Bennett recently too, which was a lot
Oh,
of
good.
fun. That was
Yeah,
cool.
nice.
So, could you tell me a little bit about the landscape in the Northeast? I mean, I wouldn't quite call Pennsylvania the Northeast, so I want to hear a little bit about. So I bet it's a bit different than I grew up with. I went to a national park, I think, in Maine, Arcadia. Is that?
Oh yeah, that's a
Yeah,
famous, yeah,
yeah, and
beautiful
that was
park.
really beautiful. But I'm
Yeah,
curious, like what are kind of the natural inspirations for you in terms of trees, in terms of species, or kind of like rolling hills with deciduous trees on them? Like, what are the kind of inspirations that you have in the natural
yeah.
landscape for bonsai?
I think we're developing more and more our native species here in the Northeast. I think most prominently the eastern larch is the best species for bonsai, and that was popularized by especially Nick Lenz, pioneer bonsai professional, but kind of a quirky guy, but very creative. And he has trees in the Montreal Botanical Garden. He has trees at the I believe the Pacific Northwest collection has trees of his, and I'm not sure the National Collection does. But he was an amazing artist. He was a good friend of mine. We would write back and forth to each other. But Larch, and we have a collector, Chris Springer in Massachusetts, who goes up to Maine and collects. So Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, where there's more mountainous areas, and it's a very cold climate, which the larch thrives on very cold winters. That's where they're collected mainly. They used to be prevalent. There's even some down in Rhode Island and Connecticut, but less and less because, with climate change, it's warmer down here and they've kind of evolved out of the area. But I think Nick Lenz used to also collect in the Adirondack regions and Nova Scotia. David Easterbrook has some amazing ones from Canada. So I would definitely say the larch is the most prominent collected species here. I think the eastern white cedar is also a strong candidate, although the foliage is a little larger. There are some old species out there, and that's also a very cold hardy species that's collected in this area. After that, you got pitch pine, which we love up here, and I have some of my students are avid collectors, and they supply even some of the nurseries in the area. They'll
Oh,
collect and
interesting.
sell, and they'll sell to club members.
Is that a
Doug Tate.
multi-flush pine? Is that a multi,
Yes,
or is
yes.
it
I
single
don't.
flush?
I no. It can be. In fact, today I decandled. I have a Shohin one, and I decandled today. I don't decandle them every year. They're not quite as vigorous as black pine, but yes, when they're strong, they can be decandled. Jack pine is another species, and let's see, pitch jack. Oh, red spruce, short needle spruce, also can be collected in northern New England. And crab apples. I have a friend, Doug Taylor, in Massachusetts, who collects a lot of crab apples, field grown, what he calls cow chomped crab apples. So, yeah, there's a lot of hornbeams and other species. Birch are kind of lesser species, but yeah, those are the main ones I would say.
Oh, very cool. So there's a pretty active collector community then out
Yeah,
there kind of bringing
definitely.
out these natives and bringing them into the bonsai sphere.
Yeah, I think more and more. Yeah, sure.
Oh, very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I'm very in the West Coast, on the West Coast, it's very common. We have lots of, going back to John Naka, and they've been collecting California junipers and Rocky Mountains and all these different species for a long time. So it's cool to hear that there's still there's
Yeah.
that same kind of culture building on the East Coast too.
We definitely have some envy, and there's a lot of practitioners out here who buy from Andy Smith, Taj Schlafer, and the whole crew out west who collect some of those, and they do fine out here. Rocky Mountain juniper, ponderosa pine, they're not quite as vigorous, but yeah, they're out here. Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to ask about that. Where does the majority of material come from? Like, do you have established field growers that you're buying from? Is it a lot of it you're getting it from, you know, folks that are a little bit farther away, like in Colorado or whatever, the collectors there, or where's the majority of material coming from on the East Coast?
I think on the club scene, a lot of it is collected materials or buying from other members. There certainly is those who are serious will purchase from collectors in the West Coast. Some of those species you mentioned, the mountain junipers and pines. We also just mentioned in the Boston area, we're kind of spoiled. We had three major nurseries, bonsai nurseries: New England Bonsai Garden, which is transitioning to a new name, Bonsai Outlet. We've had Bonsai West, which was the first, predates New England Bonsai Garden, and then Sue Thin's nursery, Royal Bonsai Garden in Stoughton, Mass. I think that's closed, but he still has people by reservation. You can make an appointment and see him, and he still has some amazing trees. So when he was active, there was this amazing choice. And a little history here, and I love the history of bonsai. New England Bonsai Garden used to fly out to the Portland area, rent a 30-foot truck, and drive down the California coast and stop at all the bonsai nurseries and plant nurseries, fill that truck, and then drive across country. So we always had a supply of California trees. The trouble is with the internet, the last 10 years, it's famine now. There's not that great a supply because you guys in the West Coast know where to go because of the nurseries, word of mouth, the clubs out there. So you're buying your own trees out there. It's less for us to bring back. so we don't rely on it as much. But I think Bonsai West did the same thing. I don't know if you've heard of the Hatanakas, an old Japanese bonsai nursery in California. I don't
I
know
don't think
that.
so.
I
I don't
don't
think I
know
have
the
actually.
town. They probably stopped in the 70s or 80s, but they grew some amazing trees, junipers, and
Hmm.
there's still a bunch out here on the East Coast that people say, "Well, I have a hot Tanaka." It's a famous.
Oh, interesting.
You may want to look that up or talk to some of the old timers about that.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely ask about that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's not one that I've heard. Like, there's definitely, yeah, it's a funny thing about bonsai where trees will have their, I don't know, their provenance listed in the, like, oh, this is a Kenosha cypress, or, this is a Naka juniper, right? So it's cool to hear
yeah,
that
yeah,
there's
yeah.
some of that West Coast provenance on the
Oh,
East
yeah.
Coast too.
I'll tell you a quick little story. I From New England Bonsai, I bought a literati black pine from them that they got in California, and I actually showed it at the national show I think 4 years ago. And it when I bought it, it still had a little aluminum tag. You know the ones where you could like press in with a pen or
Yep,
pencil,
yep, very familiar with those.
and it had the repotting schedule back to the 70s, and it was purchased by Hitoshi, the previous owner of New England Bonsai, and he told me that it was a tree styled by John Knocker originally. So it'll have like 1976 repot, and it'll go all the way up to the 90s, and I bought it in the 2000s, but I still have the tag on it too, so it's kind of a
Oh, that's
special
so
tree.
cool.
It's not a
Yeah,
Shohin, but it's a nice historical tree to have out here.
yeah, absolutely. That's super fun.
Yeah.
D is a lot of the history on the West Coast, a lot of the clubs were founded by Japanese kind
Hmm.
of people. I'm curious if it's similar on the East Coast. Like, do a lot of the clubs, or like, is there that kind of Japanese provenance or history to them, or is it more varied? Like, maybe it started a little later once
Well,
things were more accessible.
yeah. Well, it started a little later, but I think the strong Japanese influence is Yuji Yoshimura in the 50s, and he's our John Naka. He came
Okay.
from Japan. He taught bonsai at Brooklyn Botanical Garden. He helped them start the collection. Oh, there's another collection. My friend David Castro, who is the curator, is going to be mad at me if I don't mention the collection at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. It's a very nice collection there, and they also have a nice Japanese garden. So if you're in the Brooklyn area, you should look that up. But yeah, Yuji, and he wrote almost an encyclopedic book on bonsai in the 60s, and he was Bill Valvanis's teacher, and had a strong connection with him. So he taught a lot of people on the East Coast in the New York area in the 50s and 60s. He actually taught many wives of American diplomats post World War II in Japan. He was so he had a connection with the United States citizens in Japan before
Oh,
he
very
came
cool.
here. So he would be our strong Japanese influence. The big difference, which you might not think of this, but I wrote an article about the history of women in bonsai in the Northeast. And I think women played a more prominent role here in the Northeast than, say, in California, which was pretty much predominated by Japanese American men. I'm sure there's some women, but mostly men. For instance, I mentioned the Arnold Arboretum. In the beginning, they had no one to take care of the trees, but a woman, Connie Dodarian, took care of those trees, did all the repotting of those trees, and she had some experience with bonsai. I believe she studied. She may have studied with Yuji Yoshimura. I'm not sure about that at this point. The other person on the East Coast was Lynn Perry Allstat, who was the wife of a diplomat and was probably the first woman who studied with a bonsai master in Japan. She studied with Mr. Murata in Omiya and wrote a book about her experience learning bonsai in Japan as an American. And that book's, I believe, from the 60s. So she grew up When she moved back here, she lived in the Pennsylvania area. The other woman that I always talk about, who was kind of, in a way, my mentor in Shohin, was Dory Froning. She was like really into Shohin bonsai, and in the 70s, she put out a mimeograph newsletter called Mame Bonsai Growers of America, that if you sent her $1, she would send you this newsletter like every few months. And then then she became the writer for the Shohin column in Bill Valvanis's International Bonsai, called Dory's Bonsai, Shohin Bonsai Tips. And then when she was older, I asked her if I could, when she was ready to give it up, if I could take over the column. And she graciously let me do that. So I wrote over 50 columns in International Bonsai in the early 2000s until the magazine ended, which I kind of missed because I like writing. So,
Oh,
so
that's
those
so
women,
cool.
those are prominent women. Marion Gillenswan, another New York person who studied with Yuji. There were many women who promoted bonsai and started clubs and kept the flame going, until others came along.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I also, I feel like the word diplomat came out multiple times too, which was kind of interesting because, I hadn't heard that associated as much with a lot of the folks on the West Coast. Usually, like they were doing bonsai or gardening of some sort. The Japanese people that would come over and they were just like living here amongst the Japanese communities. But I guess on the East Coast, it was probably a little bit more isolated. So a lot of it
Yeah,
was like politically, they had jobs that were related to Washington D.C. or stuff on the East Coast. So
right, right.
from the Japanese influence perspective, very cool. So let's get into that a little bit more. Actually, the kind of history of Shohin on the East Coast. So, well, the articles that you were telling me about and the kind of, it makes it sound like there was maybe a large focus on Shohin even before other sizes of bonsai trees. But I don't know if that's just selection bias here. But yeah, I would love to know about the history and then also your history with Shohin bonsai. Like, how did you get certified and how did that
Sure.
training process go?
Yeah, I think it's not, I don't think Shohin is bigger than larger trees on the East
Okay.
Coast. I think there is a certain popularity here, but for many people and many professionals I know will have some Shohin, but it's not, their main focus, which it became mine. I think for influences, for me, it was Sutin. Sutin in Royal Bonsai Garden. He's a magician, and I used to go to his place in the '90s and hang around with him, and just totally blown away by the work he did with Shohin bonsai. And he's fantastic with larger trees. He's won many awards at the national show, and he's done some amazing work. So I'm sure he is probably a main influence here on the East Coast for some of my contemporaries, anyways. Dory Froning, like I said, Pennsylvania area. She was in the with Chase Rosade and those crew, Jim Doyle, and that whole crew down there. She and Jack Billett, her friend, were big into Shohin and had a big influence. Like I said, she wrote the article in the magazine. I'm not sure there's anyone else I can point to that's influenced me locally. Once I got hooked, and you asked me how I got into it, it was through Sutin, definitely. I just, got just mesmerized by the small trees. And then I used to be a rare book dealer, and so I would just buy as many Japanese Shohin books and American Shohin books that I could get my hands on. And, that's when I learned about the history of Shohin in Japan. Count Matsudaira and his wife Akiko, Seiko Nakamura, and those were the two most influential people in Japan who promoted Shohin bonsai. And a little side note: when the Count Matsudaira, he goes back to the 1920s, 19 teens even. He focused more on mini bonsai like mame, under 6 inches, and the same with Seiko Nakamura. And so when they started having the shows in Japan, exhibitions for Shohin bonsai, they focus mostly on mame, smaller trees.
Oh, like
And
Gafuten and things like that were
well,
mostly
this is
smaller trees
pre
or pre that?
Gafuten. Pre
Okay.
Gafuten would be Seiko Nakamura had a show called Maihin Ten, and if you look at it at pictures in the old books, they were really small trees. A little more, actually, a little more playfulness in the displays, and in a little more flowers, little tiny trees, little figurines, not necessarily structured like Gafuten. So in 1976 it kind of got transferred. They started the All Japan Shohin Bonsai Association, and that's when Gafuten started in
Okay.
1976.
Yeah, because we just had the 50th anniversary. So,
Yeah, and I'm a member of the All Japan Shohin Bonsai Society, and I was invited. They had a big dinner because I'm a certified teacher. They invited me, but my wife had a major surgery, and I couldn't get out there. I really wish I could have, but I couldn't. But anyways, Gafuten started in 76, and the evolution of Gafuten, if you look at it now, there's more rules and almost strict rules, and the trees
yeah.
are getting bigger and bigger. So
Yeah.
some of them are even bigger than taller than 8 inches or 20
Yep. Yep.
centimeters, and that's happening
Shohin
more and
Plus.
more. Yeah, I know, it's happening more and more. And as the older I get, I'm getting more. And so they still have a kind of Maihin 10 show that
Oh, really?
emphasizes the little trees. I could send you a link of a YouTube
Yeah,
video.
that would be cool to see. I'd love to
Uh,
see that.
and their focus is more still on the tiny trees, which I really like. I'm finding I like that. I don't like the strict rules so much. I mean, I still, try to abide by it, but I'm more fascinated with like spreading or widening the structure of display, and being a little more fun and playful in how we display Shohin bonsai.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, do you have any? Yeah. What kind of ideas do you have there? Or
well, a few years ago, I displayed my favorite tree, which is a Itoyagawa juniper that I got in Japan, and I had David Niddle, who's a well-known, and you guys know him too because he builds a lot of stands for
yep.
West Coast
Yep.
folks. He's in Vermont, and he made me this really cool half moon stand, but it's different than the Japanese ones that I used for that tree at the national show. And so I think maybe, playing around with different kinds of stands is a way of doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That seems.
There's all different ways. Maybe making more landscape type things. I've noticed in some of the Mame shows, they'll have 6 or 7 trees, and it's all on ground level on little stands, but then they might have a little sand running like a river, with figurines of fish or birds, but it's a whole kind of scene that takes up of the space, and I like that. So you asked me about the All Japan, my teaching certificate. So in 2005, I was surprisedly asked to go, if I wanted to go study with Mr. Arushibata Sr., Tiger's father, for a couple of weeks because he was opening up an international school of bonsai at Taisho-en. And before he did that, he wanted to have a couple of people over as a dry run.
Oh,
So I
no
was
way.
so myself and Rob King in Pennsylvania went for a couple of weeks, and it was the dry run. And it was amazing because he didn't charge us anything. He took us out to eat every evening, and basically taught us, like each day was a different theme. And so that was an amazing experience. I have to mention that, I can't remember his name, the person who got me in touch with him. It might come back to me, but there's someone whose wife runs the bonsai restaurant in Omiya.
Uh, Goodness.
Yeah, we know who it is, but her
Yeah, I know.
husband,
Yeah, I can look it up,
Bonsai
but yeah.
Network Japan. His company is Bonsai Network Japan, and he runs tours. And I had met him on one of my trips to
Yoshi,
Japan.
Mr. Yoshi, right? I think it's
Yoshi
Yoshi.
Nakamizu. No,
Yes.
Yoshi Nakamizu. Yes.
Yoshi-san. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful man. He picked us up at the airport, drove us to Shizuoka, to Taisho-en, and then drove us back. Really, really generous man. And Mr. Ushibata was a great, great man himself. When I was there, we met Mario Comsta, who was an apprentice for 5 years at
No
Taisho-en.
way. That's
Yeah, Mario
crazy.
is a great guy. I still love Mario and his wife, and I keep in touch now and then with him, with them. He visited my house actually. After a few years later, he was actually looking for a job here in the States, but decided to live in Europe. Yeah, but yeah. So, anyways, he was our
Wait,
interpreter.
so that's so crazy. So you had been doing bonsai for, 20-ish or plus years at
40,
that point.
40 from the
40.
80s. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. Wait, 2005. From
Well,
no, I'm
2005,
in 2005 you'd been doing
I
it
went
for
to
like
Mr.
20-ish.
Ushibata's.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And then so how did they know to reach out to you or like
It was through Yoshi. So in
okay.
2003, I went on a bonsai tour with Bill Valvanis.
Okay.
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 It may have been Taikon 10, or I don't know if it was Kokofu 10, because I've been on both. But during that time, we had some free time, and we contacted Yoshi. I don't know how I got his name. Somebody said, "Oh, yeah, he does tours." So we rented him for a day. He took us in a little van, a few of us, and we went to different nurseries. So that's how Yoshi knew me. So a few years later in
Huh.
2005, when this opportunity came up that Mr. Ushibata was looking for someone to do this test run, Yoshi contacted Rob King and myself, and we went over there. That's
That's
how that
so cool.
connection happened. And
Very, very
so,
cool.
just as a
And you were
side
over there
note,
for a few weeks or
just a
what
couple of
kind of
weeks, just a
okay.
couple of weeks. So one day, another segue, but there's all these segues that happen that are great. One of the days was he took us to all of these. The whole day was spent going to his suppliers, which were non-professional or what I would call serious hobbyists. And they're the biggest supplier of pre-Shohin bonsai. They grow like black pines from
Mm,
seed in their method with the colanders, or they grow junipers. So we went to like, I don't know, 6 places. Well, one of the places was this older man. He was in his late 80s, and he had some junipers that he had grown from seed that were like 24 years old, beautiful deadwood. And I was able to purchase one. And that's what I, had brought back. And
and show.
that's my favorite tree. But, it's very precious to me. I call it my Arushibata juniper. But anyways, yeah. So I emphasize, even in the United States, I think collectors are probably the biggest supplier of pre-bonsai for professionals. But I wish that we had more like serious enthusiasts you mentioned who could grow in the ground or start from seed and supply pre-bonsai or intermediate level bonsai to professionals to style to the next level, because
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
thriving in Japan, especially with Shohin.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's a call to action for everyone listening to
There you
start a
go.
crop of something. Well, I think it's hard to. Well, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent. I wanted to before we get into that, I wanted to ask a little bit more about your time there. So, my understanding is that for like he put you up in an apartment, or were you living at his house? And
Uh,
then,
No, he had a separate building on
yeah,
Taisho-en. His home
yep,
was, away, but he had a separate building, and we kind of slept on these mattresses on the floor. So it was rough and ready, but it was fine, and then we'd have a little breakfast in the morning. And in Japan, for lunch, we'd walk down to 7-Eleven because they have all these
oh yeah,
7-Elevens that have sandwiches, like egg sandwiches, and they cut the crust away from the white bread. And people live off those things, so that's where we had lunch. But he would take us out to dinner every night, which was cool. He's really,
so cool. That's really fun. And so Mario was there at that time, and he acted as a
yeah. He had his
translator
own
to help.
apartment off site, and
Okay,
he had an amazing collection there because I don't know how many years. He probably was in year 4 or 5 when I went, and amazing collection. He was a great inspiration to me as well for Shohin.
super cool. Yeah, what's cool about Taisho-en? I mean, I guess I never saw it before, but under Taiga now, there's a really there's a really good like he runs the gamut in terms of awesome top level Gafuten and
Oh
Kokufu
yeah.
winning Shohin all the way up to large trees that are contenders and winners in those shows or Sakafu, right? Which is you know it shows there's a lot of di- diversity or utility of skill across
Mm.
the bodies of work at that nursery, which is very cool. Yeah, I mean that's so cool to hear that you were like the first class essentially to do that, and that's a
Kind of, yeah.
program that's continued to today, right? Which is
Yeah, so
insane.
then he started this 3 month program. You'd get a work visa or a student visa for 3 months, and I mean, I know some people from Spain. I think what's his name? Not Howard Smith, but Ron Smith went there for the school later, and
Mm,
he was friends with Mario too, and we're friends on Facebook, so we talk once in a while about that.
super cool.
Yeah.
So you also you kind of grazed over this or kind of moved by it pretty quickly, but I was very intrigued to hear that you were like a rare book collector. Was this, I guess, like buyer and seller? Was this bonsai related books specifically, or
Oh
just
no, no.
in
Although
general?
I it kind of evolved into that for friends and stuff. But no, when I got out of college, I didn't know what to do. I had a sociology degree, and so first I opened a rare bookstore, a used and out of print bookstore with a friend, and made no money. Was poor, dirt poor, and I had one daughter and a wife. And then from there, I studied bookbinding. I always loved books. So then I studied bookbinding, and I did that with a friend, a partner, for 4 or 5 years. Made no money, and then after a few futile attempts at regular work, this partner and I in bookbinding started a box making business. So high end
Oh,
portfolio cases for artwork. And we did that for 30 years, 35 years until I retired. So books it was a general books, but whenever Bonsai books came through, they went home with me.
oh, very cool. What's your prized kind of? Yeah, I'd love to hear like what are your holy grails in the book in the bonsai book world,
Uh,
and like
but
what are some of your favorites in your collection?
that's a whole episode. But I have a 3 volume Japanese book from the mid 1800s, with the traditional binding, the thread binding on the outside, and it shows illustrations of air layering, cuttings. This is the 18 mid
No
8
way.
early 1800s, yeah, and a lot of pictures of pines in nature as inspiration. Just calligraphy drawing or pen and ink drawings. So that's probably the oldest book for sure. But I have a
Wow.
few like there's a book that the first book in English by a Japanese bonsai professional was from 1940, Mr. Ozaka. Nozaki, I'm sorry, Nozaki, that I have, that I cherish, and there's others, but and a cute little side thing. Mr. Kato came here before he passed away at the World Bonsai Convention in Washington, D.C., and there was a reception for him. And he was signing his book, the Forest and Landscaping Planting, that
Yep.
was
Yep.
published in the U.S. So when I went up to him, I gave him the book and he signed it. But then I have his original book from Japan of that book, and he looked at it and he looked at me and he looked at it and he signed that as well. So I have both copies. I have the Japanese version and the English
Oh,
version.
very cool. He was impressed. He was like, "Whoa,
Yeah, he was. I think he was
how'd you
surprised.
get this?" Yeah.
I actually bought it from Bill Valvanis, who I'm
Okay.
sure has it. He found it in Japan, and when I saw it, I actually saw him at the California Shohin symposium that they have in Santanello one year, and he had it, and I said I got to have that, and I bought it from him. I think he overcharged me because I've seen him a lot cheaper since then, but that's all right. I wanted it at the time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard to find, so
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely levels to the book game there. Apparently, I had never heard of a lot of those books, but very cool. I think last time I was in Japan, I don't really collect books, but I was with some people that did, and so we were, when we were at Morimai's in at S Cube. He was looking for a copy of this specific book, and Morimai had it, so he was really happy. But yeah, there's all these very interesting. Well, I think it's cool how for a lot of these, they're like, it seems like there was a culture of creating a book to like commemorate your collection or like a specific event, and so there'd be these limited print
Oh
runs of
yeah.
like 500 books, and they would be kind of like gifts that they would give out to guests, right?
Right.
And
Right. Right.
once they're gone, they're gone, and so there's this limited circulation of books that are out there, and so and they can be really amazing resources. What you talked about of like being able to look at the history and see, what techniques they were teaching in the 1800s for bonsai, that's crazy. That
Yeah.
sounds so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely cool.
All right, well, yeah, I don't want to take us too far off
So
the
sure.
bonsai train, but that was very, very cool, very interesting to hear and talk about. Alrighty, so while we're on the subject of Bill, and I would love to Bill Valvanis, I'd love to understand more about. I actually have never been to the national show, so I'm imagining it's similar to the Pacific Bonsai Expo, but would love to hear about the history of that and like your impression of how it shapes the bonsai scene in the Northeast.
Sure. So originally it started on a much smaller scale. Well, not, yeah, it was a smaller scale, and it was in like a hospital, a room in a hospital, believe it or not, originally. But
Really?
they were, yeah, but it was still, we were still, Bill still got people from California to come. I remember some of the first, I've been to every show except one. I had surgery one year. But as it evolved, trees got better and better. Which I would expect from any kind of show. And so let me step back just a little bit. Before the national show, Bill had a fall symposium every year in September, which people on the East Coast and Canada loved because it was kind of like the end of a season. You'd get together with friends. He would have speakers from the US and all California and also from Europe or Japan. Usually every year a Japanese a professional would come and do demonstrations, workshops, whatever, and a great vendor area.
Roughly when was this?
So this was in the
Like,
'90s up
okay,
till the early 2000s, and until he started putting his energy into starting a national show, and I think it just became too much to do both, which is common sense.
very fair.
So
Yeah.
then he started the national show, which is every other year. And as it evolved and it moved into this sports complex, much bigger venue, you get more and more people coming in from all over the United States. Until I would say it peaked when, Ryan Neal would come in with his caravan, bringing trees from California and Portland area and the whole Northwest. And so it was a strong national presence, and from the south people drove up from Florida, rented trucks, and we had trees from everywhere, and it was fantastic. Again, a place to get to meet bonsai lovers from all over the country, to shop from vendors all around the country, and to see beautiful bonsai. It's great. Now, as it's kind of evolved in the last few years, with you guys having the Pacific show, which is I still haven't been, but I will get there, is a fantastic show from what I hear. And I think people like Ryan has mentioned, it's just too much to drive across country. Our
It's a
country
lot.
is so big. Like in Europe, you can have a show and everyone in Europe can go, and it's 8 hours. Here, you got to drive. I don't even know how many hours from
Yeah,
California
30
to
plus
to
hours. Yeah.
Rochester. Yeah, it's like unbelievable. And then the risk of trees getting damaged, pots breaking, whatever. So I think at this point it's going to be more of a West Coast. It'll still be called a national show, but I'm not sure we're going to get everybody from the West Coast that we used to get, which is okay. I mean, that's the way it is. Bill's getting a little on in age. He won't tell you that, but so we're all kind of waiting for the succession of the national show. What's going to happen? Maybe it'll just be an Eastern show. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I think what's happening now, it will continue. That the West Coast, the Pacific show, will be the premier show for the West Coast, and the East Coast will be the national show or whatever it's called in the future. It'd be great to have more regional shows as well in the South. I know, like, I'm a big fan of local shows too. We have a club show. There are shows in the area. I'm so happy that, like, Julian Sai, kept going with the Naka show. That, again, I'm into history, but I love that that's gone. I know it's tough on him. I was talking to him about it, but I'm glad that is still going. And I love seeing club shows, and especially like in Japan, there's a lot of Shohin club shows. And as a segue, I'm planning a Shohin. Our club, our study group, Shohin study group, is planning a show in the spring next year. It'll be our first
Oh,
show.
super cool. Can
Shohin,
yeah, can
yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about like how do you organize your study group, and then would love to hear more about the show and kind of the plans for that too.
Yeah, it's pretty new, the study group. Actually, I started one in like around 2005, and it went for a few years, and for whatever reason people lost interest in it and it disbanded. But last year we started it again, and it is a new group of people into it that I think are more committed. And there's about 10 or 12 of us, and so the meetings that we've had were basically bringing trees, discussing them, discussing repotting. This spring we did some actual repotting together. And like I said, I want to focus. I think we could have even if it's a very small show, I'd like to have a show next spring of just Shohin and Mame trees. And we're looking into venue. We could. New England Bonsai Garden or Bonsai Outlet is very great with our club, and I'm sure they would let us have it there. We're thinking maybe we should have it off site, but wherever it is, it'll be in the Boston area, and we'll have a small show for maybe a weekend show. So, but our meetings are mostly discussing. The one thing we started last year, somebody had purchased, or actually, I don't know if he purchased or was gifted these white pines grown from seed. They're about 5 years old. So we're having a 5-year contest. So each person in the club, in the Shohin study group, got one of the trees. We took pictures, and we're going to come back in 5 years and see who won, who got the best, voted as the best,
Oh,
developed
that's
a little
cool.
white pine from this group. Yeah, it's fun.
That is super fun. Jonas always says, he always makes jokes at Shohin school and stuff like that about, oh, if you've got 12 people, then you can put together one, proper Shohin
One
display,
display.
right? Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's a challenge. That is a challenge. Yeah. You need so many
It's
trees in your
yeah.
collection.
How do you guys deal with that? Like, are you going to pull trees together from across the members to create displays, or are
I
you expecting
well,
people to put their own display up
we're
and
gonna
maybe
I'm
it's
gonna
less
try to
traditional?
have yeah, I'm gonna try to have a meeting maybe in the winter, so before this happens, so we can plan. But I'd like to see more collaboration, because like I said, it's very hard. You need like 40 trees to come up with a 7 tree display, because you don't know what's going to look good that year. You need, as you need variety. You need different size. You need the pot going in the right direction for the whole flow of the display. There's so many elements that I think that if we pool our resources, and now over 40 years, I have many, many different Shohin stands. So I'm going to, lend out people. Like I have seven tree, 5 tree box stands. I have a half moon stand, a full moon stand. I have a 2-tiered stand, and I have all these little stands for individual trees. So, I'll offer those up that people can
Nice.
use in the show. So even if we have, say, 5 displays the first year, that's fine. We're going to we're going to promote the art of Shohin bonsai. I think I'm going to call the group. They don't know this yet. I'm going to call it Shohin Spirit, so that we bring our spirit to Shohin. Yeah.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, there's actually been a little bit of a resurgence in Shohin here on the West Coast or I guess global, or not globally, but nationally, because Jonas and Andrew have been doing Shohin school, right? That's kind of been traveling around the
Mm,
country with Daisaku. And then
yeah.
Adam Toth came back from studying at Taisho-en, and he's been
Yep.
focusing a lot on Shohin. So in our club, the East Bay Bonsai Society that I'm a part of, it's heavily influenced by Adam and Jonas. And we put together like 5 Shohin displays in our show last year that were like much higher
Excellent.
quality than previous years. So we're really, obviously it takes time to ramp up, but we're really
Yeah.
starting to see some more good Shohin show up in our shows, which I'm really excited about, which is going to be fun.
That is excellent. So we have, I mentioned Sue Thin, of course, but we have Shannon Salyer down in Tennessee. He's a big Shohin supplier, teacher, and
Mm.
artist. He's very good. I'm trying. Oh, Mel Goldstein, who's retired, and he donated trees somewhere up in Michigan, I think, to their collection. He's won many awards at the national show. He has amazing Shohin trees, and he has a lot of imported trees. I mean, legally imported trees, and it's a fabulous collection. I really look up to Mel. He's got some really nice Shohin trees.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's strange at the Pacific Bonsai exhibition. There's just been a Shohin category for the first 2 years, but really there's like 1 or 2 Shohin display. I mean, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I don't think it's too controversial to say that there's maybe one or two Shohin displays that the West Coast is able to put together at each show that are like could be something that you would see at Gafuten or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
the benches are thin. So hopefully we see that resurgence start to happen.
Sorry.
I'm expecting that. Well, the thing is, you don't get Shohin by accident, right? Like with a large tree, a
No.
large conifer, it's like okay, you can you can kind of just let something grow really big and then
Right.
or collect it and then you make it into a tree and you can do that in a 4-year period or whatever. I mean,
Right.
it's not going to be,
Right.
it's not going to have the same mochikomi, but you can kind of make a tree from something that was grown, you know, pretty haphazardly, right? Or collected.
Right.
But
Sure. Yeah.
with Shohin, you know, you're not going to get a Moyogi black pine top of box that's like excellent within the archetype of Shohin by accident, right? Like somebody really has to be,
Takes
planning on it
time.
from the beginning of the growth stage, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So the other I didn't mention is you asked people who supply trees.
yeah.
Mark Comstock in Connecticut he's perfected the method of growing Japanese black pines from the root
Oh,
cutting
cool.
method, and he supplies a lot of people with those black pine cuttings. So that's one person that we do have that does that. But growing a black pine from seed into a powerful tree to put at the top, I mean, Jonas might be able to do it faster. He's a master of it too. But, I have one tree from seed. It's 17 years old and it's just about ready. So on the East Coast with a shorter growing season, and I did it, the colander method, I did everything to accelerate, but it takes a while. It has not in 17 years been in a bonsai pot. Next year it will go in a bonsai pot.
Wow.
It's always been in a grow pot. But it's and Boone has helped me. I'm in Boone's study group. He comes out here, and he's helped me a lot through the last 10 or 12 years that we've been studying with him to get it to where it should be. But it takes a while. It takes a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is kind of the timeline though. I mean, Jonas has given me similar numbers whenever I look at
Mm,
his black pine grown from seed stuff. Like it's 15, 20 years that he's had
mm,
these trees growing. They don't,
mm.
you don't get this really compact tree overnight, right? So very
For
cool.
sure, for sure.
I wanted to ask you about something that you just jogged my memory on. I had some people ask about overwintering bonsai. So it's not really like I don't have a lot of expertise to give on that. I spent one winter in Colorado and I actually lost one of my trees because I didn't overwinter it properly. So,
Yeah,
you deal with the snow a lot more. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know how cold it gets there, but I mean, probably into the like low single
yeah.
digits,
Single
right? So,
digits. Sure,
yeah.
sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
do
So
you want to just give like a synopsis of high level, like how people grow bonsai in cold
Well,
climates?
from my personal experience, and like I said, we have a study group with Boone that we've been working with for about 12 years, 12 plus years, and everyone has eventually bought a greenhouse that
Mm,
is in that study group. And we meet at John Kirby, who's another great bonsai teacher, and he has a few study groups. We meet at his house. He has his Vaughn's Garden nursery there, and he has two, I think, two hoop houses and two or three more rigid greenhouses. And what it does is, so obviously Boone's from a warmer climate out west. It helps us extend our season a little bit so that black pines start need if you grow them if you winter them in a greenhouse and don't keep it too cold, you can start getting candle growth movement a little earlier than if they were like in a colder. So I would say from my experience, I have a greenhouse that I use for overwintering most of my evergreens and deciduous trees, and I keep the heater at about between 32 and 35 as the lowest. And it has a vent and stuff, and I don't use clear plastic. I want to keep it consistent temperature wise. I think that's a key. You don't want it to get to 80 degrees, but people buy a greenhouse and put it on the south side, clear plastic, and it can get to 80 degrees in the winter during the day. Even if it's cold out, the sun's going to heat it up, and you don't want that if they're dormant. So I have frosted plastic, and it stays between 32 and 45, maybe 50 in the winter. And then I also have my garage, which I use it's an attached garage for little more tender trees. Olive trees, I have olives. I have pomegranate, a few tender trees from Japan that I grow that I'm always afraid don't want to get too cold. So that's kind of a little warmer. That'll get to the upper 30s at the worst. It never gets near freezing, and it'll stay within the 37 to 48 degrees. And then the few tropicals. I love Kinzu. I love the dwarf kumquat. I mean, you really need one in the winter for a Shohin display. I have three of those, and we have a like a greenhouse window in our kitchen that's on the south side. So maybe a handful of tropical trees I grow, not many, but they do well there because there's no heat registers in the kitchen, so it'll get cooler at the nighttime, but still get plenty of sun and warm up during the day, and they do fine there. Those are my three areas for growing.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think it's hard to be successful at a large scale in bonsai in a cold area without a greenhouse.
Yeah, you
That's
need
kind of
something.
that's what I've heard as well. I mean, when you're just getting started out, maybe you put trees in your garage or you
Yeah,
kind of heal them
sure.
in the mulch or something like that, depending on the species. But a greenhouse is really invaluable at
Yeah,
the later stages.
sure.
Alrighty, well, I asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything that you wanted to chat about that we didn't get to? This has been super fun, so I really appreciate
Oh,
you
good,
kind of
good.
taking the time.
I am glad. Not really. We didn't. I just touched on the teaching certificate I got from the All
Oh
Japan
yeah,
Showing
yeah.
book.
You want
So
to share
that
some more about that?
just a little. So basically, you apply for it, and you have to be a member of the All Japan Shohin Bonsai Association, and you apply for it, and you need three references, and you need some. Obviously, in the application, you need to describe your experience teaching bonsai. Now, my connection, I know Tomohiro Masumi, who owns Kojuen in Kyoto, and he's the president of the All Japan Shorin Bonsai Society. I met him a couple of times in the early 2000s when I visited Japan, and then in 2010 I went again and visited him. But I also interviewed him for one of my columns in Bill's magazine. We did it online, and I sent him some questions. So we kind of have a relationship. I've always admired him. And so they opened this up maybe 5 years ago to foreigners to apply for a teaching certificate in Shohin Bonsai. So I reached out to Tomo, I call him Tomo, and I asked him about, how to do this. And, he told me. And I thought, three references. So Tomohiro said he would be a reference. Yay. And then through Boone, I met Daisaku Nomoto, who's also a great Shohin person. And he was out east once. I wish we could get him again, but it's too far for him. But so I'm kind of on friendly terms with him, and I have interviewed him as well for the column. So I asked him, and I asked Boone to ask him to give me a reference, and he did. And my third reference was Boone. So those were my three references, and then of course they got to make money. There's a fee to do all this, but I was accepted. So I'm totally
Awesome.
honored to have that. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the United States. I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't think I've heard of that before. That's
I
really,
know
really
of people
cool.
in Europe. I know a couple of people in Spain and others, but I'm not sure if there's anyone else certified in the U.S. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Also, just quickly mention my bonsai school, which I've been teaching at New England Bonsai for 17 years. It's called the Kaiku School of Bonsai. And Kaiku means unexpected encounter or crossing paths. So I heard this in a talk by Mr. Kobayashi years ago, and it's an old term. And I love the concept of we have an unexpected encounter with a beautiful tree, or we cross paths with another bonsai enthusiast or a tree. So that's how I named the school. And so we have a 2-year program, and it's basically to teach the basics. And a lot of it I get from Boone's teaching method: proper soil, proper repotting, proper pruning, all of that we go over in the 2 years. And it's great. I love teaching. I really enjoy teaching and learning from students as well. You learn a lot. Ed Trout down in Florida always says that he learns more from teaching, and I picked up on that. I learn a lot
Totally.
from teaching for sure.
Yep.
So
Yep.
those are the last two things I'd wanted to mention.
Super cool. Well, and ever also anyone in the in the Boston area should check out or be on the lookout for the Shohin Spirit,
Yeah,
the
definitely.
yeah the show that you're working on planning. So awesome. Well, yeah. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully I'll be out on the East Coast, or if you come out for the Pacific Bonsai Expo, would love to
Oh,
meet up.
yeah.
So
We will definitely. So, the last thing I'll say is I've been in bonsai a long time and I'm getting older, so I have a lot of mochikomi in myself. I've lived in my body a long time. It's not a pot, but it's a body. Thank you, Addison, very much. I appreciate you reaching out to me and allowing me to share some of that.
thank you, John. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.